Hey friends, welcome to Bokeh, a podcast exploring the ever-blurring lines between the personal and business lives of professional photographers. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm bringing you a special episode of the Bokeh Podcast today called Workflow Wednesday. During these special edition episodes, myself and my co-hosts will focus on helping you develop more efficient daily and weekly workflows around post-production, communication, task and project management, time management, file and image management, and yes, the list does go on. We're going to save you an incredible amount of time in your work week, and we promise not to be too nerdy. This podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Visit photographersedit.com. We're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Workflow Wednesday, yet another episode in this series very much about workflow and more specifically efficient workflow. I'm here with Haylee Gaffin and Heather Smith. How are you guys today?
Hey, doing well. Enjoying some cooler weather.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Ish, right? I mean, the humidity right now is kind of crazy. So for those of you not familiar, all of us are in the Chattanooga area, Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it did start to cool off there nicely, and then it kind of bumped back up. The temperatures bumped back up, and the humidity went crazy, and the mosquitoes have been going crazy too.
Yeah, it has not been a pleasure living in Chattanooga. I mean, like it's either like now that it's getting cooler and we can actually go outside, the mosquitoes are like literally swarming. And at first happened to me this Sunday. I was shooting a wedding. We're doing these sunset shots, and literally just like swarms. It's not like just you see one. No, it was and the bride and groom, they were just over it. I could not get my shot, and so we just had to get out of there. And I was telling the venue owner, I was like, y'all might need to spray up there. And then like the next day, I went to do an engagement session at Renaissance Park, and then again the very same thing. And then I did another one the next day in a completely different place, nowhere close to water, and we had to literally I had to shut down 3 sessions early because of mosquitoes. It's insane.
I've never heard all the photographers in the area talking about it all at the same time like this. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
I think there may have been some eggs laid inside of our car. Because I'm getting in my car and there are mosquitoes. And the other day was quite a large one too, but I know this is a very random point of conversation for those of you just listening in. Ren says hi.
Ren?
Hey, Ren, how are you? Good to see you. And for everybody watching, please don't hesitate to comment, chime in, ask questions, comment on whatever the topic is at hand. We are going to dig back into the topic of networking today. And more specifically, kind of the methodology, the approach to networking and efficient networking at that. So we're going to get to that here in just a second. Very briefly, I just want to make sure that I intro everybody here involved. So I'm going to start with Haylee this time. Haylee, say hello, and I'm going to pop your website up here on the screen for everybody listening in and watching, HayleeGaffin.com. Tell us just briefly about yourself, Haylee.
Yeah, I'm a photographer and marketer in Chattanooga, working mostly with small businesses.
Oh, perfect. You've really dialed in your brand position.
I got a soundbite.
Wow,
that is nicely done. For all of those listening in, especially those that normally listen to the podcast portion of this, we're on Facebook Live right now at facebook.com/photogsedit, PHOTOGSEDIT. And then this also goes out to our podcast, Bokeh Podcast, BOKEH podcast.com later today. And we talk a lot about this idea of a brand position, and more specifically, how to really dial it in so that you can communicate it as succinctly and precisely as Haylee just did. So for those of you listening, and that is a beautiful example of a very clear brand position. So thanks for sharing that, Haylee. And then Rich and Heather, tell us about you guys real quick. I'm going to pop your website up here on the screen as well.
Well, now I feel like it's a competition, and I think Haylee wins because she has the gift of being concise.
We're entrepreneurs from Chattanooga.
Boom! Go listen to Bonnie Bakhtiari's episode. That was I mean, she describes it so well and basically sets you up to be able to say it very concisely. But yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting point of conversation. We're going to continue to have it too at the Bokeh Podcast. And Rich and Heather, I mean, we've already had you guys on a couple of times. I think it's about time we bring you back again. So we need to do that soon.
It'd be hard to come up with a topic to cover that we don't already cover on Workflow Wednesdays, you know?
It's true. As much as this is about workflow specifically, we do tend to kind of branch out a little bit here and there. And we have covered the gamut of topics as well.
But
to that, To that very point, though, as far as a topic, we started a series last week on the idea or the concept of networking. And of course, it's a given that we all need to be networking, develop relationships, but it doesn't hurt to continue to get into that topic. And it looks like we are frozen up a little bit. Everybody there?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Haley's great.
Mm-hmm.
Can still see me okay?
Yeah. You were going a little, but now you sound great. You're sounding great.
All right, perfect. All right, so we're back again. But we started this topic of networking last week, and as I was saying, it's a kind of a given that we need to be spending time networking to develop our business. Although I will say, as a caveat, maybe we can dig into this a little bit more today too. I think a lot of photographers end up doing a lot of busy work behind the computer screen versus actually getting out and networking, creating and developing relationships in person. And so last week we talked a little bit about the philosophy behind this idea of networking. Today we're going to talk more specifically about the workflow, the methodology, if you will, and more specifically how to go about that process efficiently as possible. We're still talking about relationships, so maybe there's only so many corners that we can cut or that we want to cut for that matter. But we're going to talk a little bit about the methodology today. So let's just actually jump right into it. I think we've done a lot better job the last few weeks of just being more concise and getting right to the topic. Let's do it.
Mosquito conversation aside. Yes.
Hey, it's very important, though. Very important. We had to get the warning out. We got, who's listening to us, just don't come to Chattanooga yet.
Not yet. But, yes. Give it about a month and it'll probably cool down. And then this is a place that you want to hang out, especially outdoors. I mean, it's really turned into such an amazing city in the last few years. So, all right. So let's just jump into it. And Rich and Heather, we're gonna actually go to you guys today first. We'll mix it up, add a little bit of variety here. Let's talk a little bit about networking, and maybe you can share with our listeners and our viewers 2 or 3 of kind of the big ideas that drive the way that you go about networking, more specifically networking in person. And I know I said this last week, but I have to give kudos to you guys and Rich in particular. I know Rich spends a lot more time out while Heather is kind of managing the details at home. But the fact that you prioritize relationships in person, I think is admirable, especially in this day and age of being stuck behind our phones or being stuck behind a computer screen. Talk to us a little bit about your approach to that.
I should have Heather go out more than me because, I mean, come on, look at her. She's so much cooler and more relatable than I am. I mean, seriously, a lot of times I sometimes feel that when I go talk to a wedding planner and she's a mom and she has all this stuff that Heather could probably talk to and can relate to, like have this common ground. I can't relate on certain levels to certain wedding. So you need to step it up. You need to go. Several. Wedding planners, we'll just go out to eat with, I will establish an initial contact with them. We'll work together a few times. We'll kind of build that relationship. Then Heather and I would take her or maybe her husband out or whoever the wedding planner is, and
to that point, Rich, I'll just jump in really quick if you don't mind. Do you usually tend to kind of work on developing the personal side of that relationship as you're describing after you've met them? Do you ever take that approach of, hey, here's a list of 2 or 3 people that I want to proactively reach out to and begin to develop a relationship with? It usually goes the other way? So far I haven't needed to do that. Simply because I just been in the industry for so long. Most everybody knows me already. So, it's not like I'm starting from square one. Mm-hmm. If I was starting from square one, I just, I had goals of like, hey, I by the end of this year, I'm going to work with this planner. Then I would do basically what a cold approach of like basically just, hey, introducing myself, hey, emailing, calling, whatever I need to do. And that, technically it's harder to get in that way. Especially the higher end wedding planners, several people, everybody wants to get in with them, So I just, the approach of like, hey, we happen to be shooting a wedding together. And then basically that's a warm approach. Basically, I've already worked with her. She kind of already knows who I am. She perhaps have done some research, looked at my work online, maybe,
I began to follow her on Instagram. Hopefully she reciprocates and follows me and then looks at my work. There's all those type of things that could happen, But yeah, normally almost all the time it's like I've never worked with this person before. I'm shooting a wedding. I reach out, hey, I'm working with you this Saturday. I cannot wait to meet with you. Or like meet with you, work with you. If there's things I can do, whatever. How can I do to help to make this thing? We work as a team to, and then we kind of establish a relationship from there,
Okay, so that. And I think you mentioned that you and Heather both will take them out to eat. You guys go grab dinner for a couple hours. You're beginning this relationship, the personal side of this relationship that goes beyond just, hey, we happen to work together. From that standpoint, then, or from that point, I should say, what's the next step? Are you more proactively keeping in the back of your mind images maybe that this particular wedding vendor is going to want for their website? As you're photographing a wedding, or does that just come naturally that you have these images that you can give to them, you build that into their workflow? What's the next step in the relationship?
Yeah, I basically every wedding, I will sit down with my client and ask them who every one of their vendors is. It makes it really easy if they have a wedding planner, because the wedding planner will have that list for me. But if not, I will contact I'll contact my client and they'll ask, hey, where'd you get your gown from? Who's doing your catering? Who's doing your flowers? Who's doing your DJ? I mean, every vendor that touches a wedding, if they're a professional, then I want to know about it, And so if it is a small owned like company, it's much easier, because I mean, like if they got their gown at bridal David's Bridal, normally I just don't worry about that, because they're not really interested in networking. They're more of a corporate place. But yeah, I mean, like I basically start from there. Then I literally contact them. If I've worked with them before, I send a certain email. If I've not worked with them before, I send a different email. Basically, hey, just introduce myself. We're going to be working. We're here. Hey, I can't wait to see your cake. If there's something in particular that you're particularly proud of this wedding, please let me know. I'll pay closer attention and get some great photos for you, and get some photos to you afterwards, really soon after the wedding, so you can post them on social media, so you don't have to worry about getting photos with your iPhone or whatever. Basically, I am immediately being very proactive and saying, hey, I know who you are. I know you're working at this wedding. I want to know what you're doing for this wedding that you're proud of. And I'm going to literally put a list on my phone to a note on my phone to basically take photos of this. And I'm doing it specifically for you. And then we kind of establish a relationship through that,
Yeah. And this goes back to what we talked a little bit about last week with defining what networking is. And hopefully networking is value added. There's a value in a relationship. And so providing that value practically, what does that look like? Well, for Rich, I love these template emails that he sends out to vendors before the wedding, to touch base, introduce himself if they haven't already met. And then you can go from there and basically providing a service, adding value to the relationship. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about that is that you're helping someone on a professional level, but that automatically endears them to you on a personal level, because not everybody's taking the time to do these things. And so it's basically just a level of professionalism, and you're presenting yourself as someone who knows what you're doing, and that is a really beautiful thing for the vendors,
right? Yeah. Even if I've never met them before, it's like, if you're at the wedding, if you spot me, please come up and say hello to me. I want to meet you. I want to put a face to your business name. I want to make this as personal as possible. I can introduce them. I can give them a handshake. If I've worked with them several times and they're excited to see me, I will give them a hug. I want to progress that to make it as personal as possible, because that's who I am. Mm-hmm. And I would just want, not everyone is as extroverted as me. And so, I basically use my natural personality for that. But somebody who has a different personality than me might want to take a different approach. This is what I do, and works out really, really great. So
that's really cool. And I have to jump in and comment here. I want to ask you about I know we've touched on this before. I do want to just at least touch briefly on the workflow with delivering those images after the wedding, because this plays into the workflow as far as developing relationships with these vendors. But I have to comment on one thing, which is, and ultimately compliment you on the fact that you're proactive in your effort at sending images to vendors. You're actually making that effort up front. There was an article that I saw, I think it was on Petapixel last week, that came out. And it was, frankly, it was surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I mean, you see this kind of stuff, at least from time to time these days, but it was an overtly negative slant on the topic of images for vendors, delivering images or giving images to vendors. And basically what it was saying was that these vendors shouldn't expect, nor do they have the right to expect, images from photographers, and certainly without expecting to compensate them in some way, was the simple gist of it. And I'm not going to try to put words in their mouth, but that was the simple version. In fact, maybe Haylee, we can link to this in the show notes, just so those listening in or watching can go and see that. But anyway, I was honestly, it bothered me because it was a very entitled mentality when it comes to relationships, and from the get-go, that is going to get in the way of good relationships. It reminded me actually of some of those conversations that we've seen on Facebook groups or maybe online forums around the topic of vendor meals. This kind of entitlement that I should have X, when the reality is we're the hired help. We're there to do a particular job, and this notion that we expect them to provide an experience for us versus the other way around, I think, is backwards. But when it comes to delivering images, my suggestion, and I shared the article in our local photographers group, and my suggestion was let's flip this on its head, if you will, and instead of this reactive mentality, which is if the vendor is nice to me and wants to compensate me and give me all the appropriate credit, then I will give them images. Instead of that, this approach, Rich, that you've taken, which is very proactive in nature, which is from the moment that you've got that list of vendors, you're reaching out to them to begin a relationship of sorts. And then you're going to continue that after the fact by delivering images that, as you pointed out, add value. I think that is so much more proactive an approach. And there's always going to be for lack of a better word, a jerk who is going to either take advantage of us, maybe not give us the credit that we would like or otherwise. But if you look at the bigger picture, I think that's going to actually be the smaller percentage of situations. And the majority of the time, if we're proactive in an effort to reach out and add value to relationships, and this really pretty much holds across the board, personal or on a professional level, then it's going to pay off. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I think one of the main complaints with photographers is when they feel the sense of entitlement coming from the vendor, from that perspective, like, you owe me these images. Like, if there's any sense of maybe like a lack of understanding about how much work is actually involved in not just providing a service for your client, who are the ones who have hired us, but also then providing a service for everyone else who's been involved in this wedding day. There are innate challenges in that for sure. And to make it sound like it's easy would be doing a disservice to the conversation, I feel like. So but with that said.
But at the same time, I have a lot of grace. I have probably too much grace in that sense, because I have really worked with so many vendors and venue owners. I've worked with a couple of venue owners, and one of them really comes to mind is like she was ultra business-like. She like, and so when I first met, approached her, or the first time I interacted with her, she was almost intimidating to me, because she doesn't have my personality. She's not very personal, but she's very business-like. And when I was proactive, where she doesn't have to actually email me, hey, can I get these photos? She already knew, and what happened was she was highly impressed with that. And she emailed me back saying, I'm blown away. I've never got an email like this from any vendor before, and all of a sudden, I haven't took one shot for this person. And all of a sudden I'm already very impressed. They're already impressed with me. They haven't seen any of my work, And so to me, I'm like, I don't even want to get any vendor to that point where they had to even email me to ask me, can they get photos? I'm being proactive. I'm already letting them know beforehand And so, I mean, that basically completely eliminates. And some people, some vendors, they just don't know how to ask. They don't, they do need to be more educated. I have worked with vendors that they put my images online and they just don't, they're maybe older, social media is newer to them. Their heart is like, they're very grateful, but if I just like saw they didn't give me credit, and all of a sudden I get a chip on my shoulder, like how dare they? And instead of like, hey, a person like, hey, let me show you, and they're like, oh, I've been wanting to know how to do this more, And again, they're way more receptive. But again, I give grace because again, I want my initial reaction to anybody who I feel. Normally, my initial reaction of I'm going to be offended is almost, or that person is malicious, they're trying to do something wrong with me, is almost always wrong. Is always wrong. We just didn't have the other side of the story. There's a reasonable explanation. They're willing to change. They're willing to grow. We're willing to grow together, and then we grow that relationship, and that's what a valuable relationship is based on.
Yeah, and we have had to educate some vendors about things like this.
Oh, several vendors, especially in the Chattanooga area.
Giving grace is helpful because we need grace.
Yeah.
We mess up.
I think the word here is intent, right? And I think a lot of times, and I've certainly been guilty of it too, in all areas of life, really. It's easy to jump to a conclusion or assumption because of, Rich, as you pointed out, that so-called chip on our shoulder, or ego, or insecurity, whatever it might be, without maybe at least taking the time to ask a question or lend a little bit of perspective to the conversation. And in your case, you said that you've had conversations with vendors just to educate them a little bit. Their heart's good. They just didn't know better than to not tag you or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But and Heather, to your point as well, and of course, I can't emphasize this enough. As I mentioned earlier, I know that there's going to be the occasional jerk, the person who is going to take advantage, who is entitled. I'm not suggesting that there aren't, but I think, in over a decade of shooting weddings, I don't know that I ever ran into a situation like that. I think it's going to be the exception to the rule. It'd probably be a little bit more prevalent now than, about half of my career was film, half of mine was digital, and as social media has become more prevalent, probably much more an issue now. But I would still venture that it's the exception to the rule. And the last thing that we need is to be stressing out or being upset at somebody who happened to misuse our images. I think if we take a very proactive approach, it minimizes the possibility of that even happening to begin with, even less than it probably already would have happened. And so I love that proactive mentality. But let's keep going, Rich. You've reached out to these vendors ahead of time, begun a relationship, at least virtually anyway. You shoot that wedding. Now you have images to deliver. Can you just briefly talk us through that workflow?
It depends. It depends on the venue. It depends on the venue and the vendors. Okay, and I hope not too many vendors are listening.
We're being on it. We're being honest, right? This
is being an open book here.
Yeah.
For certain venues and certain vendors that I want to work with more, I will go above and beyond to get the images to them. There has not been unheard of for me to literally hire someone to come on the wedding day and literally edit the images and get them to the vendors before the wedding is over. And so,
wow, that's awesome.
And so. And if I'm doing that, if I'm doing that level of service, I'll letting them know. A lot of times it's like I get great feedback. Sometimes there's been a couple times I didn't get any feedback at all. I'm like, what and then you're like, they have no idea what we went to get them to them that fast. So, but again, they're busy. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're busy. I don't know. But I mean, again, I have definitely have given that level of service before, and where I'm like, turn them black and white if you need to, don't worry about color, don't worry about we're trying to get that to them as fast as possible, that kind of stuff. So, and they're also very most of the time, 90% of the time, they're very, very grateful and just blown away by that level of service, because
that is a whole different level for sure. Beyond what most people probably even consider. If you're not going to that extent though, and you're delivering images after the fact, is there a particular process? Like when you're going through, Heather, I know that you handle the culling. When you're going through and culling images, are you flagging images of particular color, knowing that these images need to go to this vendor, or this image needs to go to that vendor, et cetera?
Yeah, I try to flag them yellow for vendors in general. And then we can get together a shoot-proof gallery folder, and we'll create a unique link specifically for the vendors. Mm-hmm. And also, if it's a wedding that we're going to blog, which is not every wedding, we will also make sure that link finds its way to the vendors, who can then share that link and share their work, because those are photos that if we do put together a wedding blog, we're going to be including the details from the day, which will pertain to the different vendors. And so, yes, we will flag the images yellow. We will send links to the blog. And this is one thing that I really, really love that Rich does. This is a brochure that says the wedding experience. It's a double-sided. I don't know if brochure is the right word, but
it's like a 4x8.
It's like a 4x8 made out of really beautiful, thick. This is cardstock that we get printed.
It's called soft touch.
It's amazing. It feels like butter.
It feels like velvet. What I wanted such high quality. I'm not going to give them like thin type. I wanted something that they're like, oh my gosh. Every time somebody touches this paper, they're like, oh my word, that's amazing.
Rich is sitting watching Netflix at night and just holding one of these cards. And
yes. But
the unique thing about these is that Rich will actually state specifically on the back, wonderful, you've booked your wedding with Hell Farms. We're thrilled. And then he makes it unique to the venue, wherever the photo was taken. And the photos that go on this were specific to that venue or specific to that vendor that we're delivering them to. So it's not like a mass produced flyer that we can hand out to anybody. It's a brochure he gets specifically printed for a venue or for a vendor. And then he goes and meets with them in person and gives them these.
Using images that took from the wedding or whatever. And again, like they may or may not hand them out to the brides. I want it so high quality that they would be like, it matches their brand. That like, hey, we're a high end brand. Everything they hand to.
So this is just another way to encourage an in-person meeting, face-to-face. You're giving them something of value that shows off their venue or their flowers or their cake or whatever, and they can hand to their clients, and it makes them look good, and obviously it reflects our work as well. And so he will meet in person to deliver these, and then have conversation, have a great little meeting with a vendor. Yeah. So
and you were talking about you were actually talking about the workflow of getting the images to them. Heather kind of mentioned it really quickly. We actually use Shootproof, and so Shootproof, just really about a couple of months ago, they created a way for you to create a private a folder inside of a gallery where no other wedding visitor can see, but only and you can give that particular folder specific things like you can give only that folder. People who vote go to that folder, they can download the images, but no one else, and they can be only specific images that you want the vendor to have, but also reflects your brand. Sometimes I would give my entire wedding gallery to wedding vendors, and they would download images. And they would put them on social media, but I was realizing that they were putting images that they were tagging me, but I didn't want to be known for those type of photos, like group photos, like this not like So this allowed me to give them what they want, but also what I want them to have. That would be beautiful. It would, but also reflect my brand as well. And so so when Shootproof add that little feature, that was like a godsend. It was amazing.
That's great. And Kenny actually popped in and he said, what site was that? So that is shootproof.com.
Yeah, Shootproof.
We'll link to it in the notes as well. But if you just go to shootproof.com, you can see this feature set.
Yeah. Hey, Kenny, you email me. I'll send you a specific link. They just figure out how to do associate links. So
there we go.
There you go.
Rich is going to get those referral goodies then.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. I'll give you my referral link. That's what you can put in the show notes.
That's fine.
I have two questions about the delivery of those cards, and yet again, you guys are impressing me because this is something that is probably largely unheard of from wedding photographers. And I think at least part of it is something that I alluded to at the very beginning of our conversation, which is that a lot of photographers are overwhelmed with busy work that they probably shouldn't be doing, that they should be delegating or at least simplifying and automating. And so the idea of taking time to create a card, ordering it, getting it back, scheduling a time to go deliver it to someone, to a vendor, meet with them in person, is just not something that even crosses their mind. So I'm curious, both... first of all, how much do those cards cost? How many do you print? And then secondly, do you kind of build these trips to meet with vendors into your week? Like, do you have certain days that you go out and do that? How do you work that into your schedule?
Yeah, I put a lot of priority on networking. So I mean, like if I will clear my schedule for certain vendors, you know, I mean, like if because a lot of times they may be busier than I, or they may not have the flexibility in their schedule that I do, and so if they can only meet, at, 4:00 on a Monday, and I will move my schedule around if I need to meet with them, because again, I put a high priority on that, because again, I want to value their time, but also value our relationship as well, And so these I get these printed at WHCC, again, open book.
And again, the paper that we use is called Soft Touch Matte, and it's the best thing your fingers will ever.
It's just you can get. But a word of warning. Okay, I got some business cards made of the same stuff, and so I'm trying. You have some in your pocket, and you're trying to like just grab one, and like there's no way they can't all stick together with this particular paper. It's not they're not really slick. So you don't get business cards made out of this stuff. Okay? Just regular cards, I made that mistake once. I'm trying to take the whole bundle out of my pocket just to get one of them. So there.
How many will you order generally?
Normally I order 25 for a specific reason. I say, here's 25. It costs me about $21. Okay. They're fairly cheap. And I say, hand those out when you get low. Let me know. I will bring you more out again. Again, establishes if I have newer photos from that I've worked at their venue, I will update it. I'll put some photos I'm even more proud of on here, and then so I'm constantly updating it and constantly like going out there and seeing the vendors. So I give basically just 25 of them. For example, I have a wedding dress shop, and they were wanting to put all of these into into a packet that they were going to give their brides at a show. And so they said, I was like, and then I just said, how many do you want? You want 50 of them, 100 of them, is yours, and I deliver to them. They put them all into no, actually they give them into welcome packets. If a bride gets a gown from them, they give a packet to them, and I'm the only photographer in that packet. So it works out great. I mean, again,
but you're probably the one of the few, if not the only, photographers who've actually made the effort to do something like that too. Again, proactively, and I think that's impressive.
But again, I took a playbook, a play out your playbook. As I approached them and said, "Hey, what can I do for you?" They said, "We need headshots." I said, "Done and done. Don't pay me. This is. I mean, like I want to do this because I have a relationship with you. Most photographers and most old school photographers wouldn't even dream about doing that. They would be like, hey, my time is worth this much, and I'm thinking long term. So if I shoot their headshots and took an hour of my time, they hand this out to every a person who buys a gown from them, and I book 5. I mean, come on, let's do the math. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I mean, like,
I'll be honest. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Heather.
I was just going to say, for one of our favorite, venues, we just ordered a $450 wedding album for them,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But this is part of the relationship that we have. It just.
Yeah. So if I go to a wedding, and that's true. If I go to a wedding, now everybody's going to be doing this now, but it's not cheap. Okay.
Now they'll just be copying you, though,
exactly.
Rich, and everybody know that they're copying you. So
exactly. There is a venue that I absolutely love to work with, and they're very receptive. They love me. I love them. Guess what? I go in and see, hey, what are you guys showing? Walk me through the process of you guys showing a potential bride your venue. Let me see what kind of stuff do y'all show them. I'm looking at these photos and albums that these other photographers give them that they got from maybe Shutterfly, for like maybe 20, 40, $50, and I'm like. It looks
time
like
to step up your game, huh? Show them up a little bit.
So here I am, and I'll bring an album.
Forget $50, $450.
Exactly. So I brought them a 12 by 12 leather album that probably weighs close to 15 pounds.
Wow.
To the album. And guess which one they show their potential clients more over a really. Course. You have a thin album about this thin. You have a thick album about this thick. That weighs about 15 pounds, extremely high quality. Guess which one they're going to show that potential client? Because
it's going to highlight how incredible and beautiful their venue is. Their venue that is not a cheap venue.
Yeah, I've got so many inquiries from brides that said, they show me your wedding album. It looks amazing. I want to hire you, and I want one of those wedding albums.
Wow, that's cool.
I haven't talked to them yet. You know what I'm saying? Yep. But again. That's just what happens with networking ideas. So,
well, this has been good. And by the way, Sarah chimed in and said hello. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hey, Sarah.
Good to see you. I love this conversation because, again, it's a beautiful, beautiful example of what a photographer, I think, should be spending, especially wedding photographers, spending much, much more time on, and the development of relationships with those vendors who ultimately can bring them business. There's a personal benefit there, too, if you're actually making a genuine effort to develop a personal relationship where you have this wonderful connection with the people that you have the opportunity to work with. And, oh, by the way, they're going to also want to work with you and send you more business, as you pointed out, Rich. One last question about this, and I have one other kind of networking specific question for you, and then I want to jump to Haylee. But this cost, I mean, you're talking about $20-$25 for those cards. That's one thing. $450 for an album. I know you're not going to do that all the time, so that's not going to be a regular expense. But do you all build the cost of marketing into, let's say, the budget per wedding, or maybe do you have an annual budget for marketing where you build these costs in so that it's not a concern?
No,
it's not that organized. It's not.
Okay. No. You give us way too much credit, buddy. No, again, I think we've talked about this before. Heather and I have just decided a long time ago to live way below our means. So I mean, it's not that big of a deal. And so we find things that we know that if I can take a $450 and turn it to $5,000-$10,000, I mean,
it's nothing.
It's nothing. You know what I mean? Like
literally.
I just basically utilize that. I mean, it's a really, really good investment. And I tell you, I've told so many people I've never done a bridal show. I never have. I would rather. Instead of spending $600, $1,000 at a bridal show, and probably never, maybe get one wedding, maybe two if you're really, really good, then I would much rather use that money that I would have put into a bridal show and blow some vendors' minds, okay, through networking. Because again, I can do that all year round. That relationship all year round. So
that's really, really good. I think, again, a lot of photographers, we talked about the time element of this conversation, which is that how am I going to have the time to go out and focus on developing relationships, I have to sit at home and edit my images. Or
I was just going to say, you use Photographer's Edit, yeah.
and of course we laugh, and it is funny, and it may seem a little bit biased, but the reality is that editing specifically is the most time-consuming element of a photographer, especially a wedding photographer's workflow. If that goes away, you now have the opportunity to be able to invest that time in things that actually grow your business. And I say this all the time, but it's not a line; it's a reality. I lived it. And of course, this is another wonderful example. And you and Heather, Rich, that you're delegating the busy work so that you now have time to focus on those things that are going to actually drive business your way. And even the notion of spending a few $100s on a sample album, that translates to value added for that particular relationship, which then translates to a pretty significant return. So
And one more point that I wanted to make real quick before we move on is that he mentioned the bridal show, and I think that bridal shows are great. I think they work really well for a lot of photographers. We have nothing against them at all. But the thing about spending.
Why you're laughing?
Okay. Well, you finish that point, and I'll tell you why I was laughing.
But the point that I was going to make is that, if you as a photographer spend a lot of your marketing dollars on something like a bridal show, then you might have some clients who are coming and are choosing you, which is great, and that's fine. But when you put your marketing dollars into networking, you get to choose who you want to spend those marketing dollars on. And you get to proactively decide, we love this venue, and a lot of our ideal clients get married at this venue. And so we want to choose to specifically put our marketing dollars here in this relationship. And so it just kind of turns the tables a little bit with how you spend your marketing dollars. It's a little bit less left to chance, maybe.
Well, not only that, you're talking about a long-term investment. If you spend, let's say, $1,000 or $1,500 on a booth at a wedding show, and whatever other materials and samples and so forth that you have to order for that, that's a one-off marketing opportunity, and for that matter, kind of a shotgun approach too, right? If you're investing that same amount of money, Rich, as you pointed out, in these relationships which are ongoing, the return there is going to be so much greater. And again, there's a personal benefit here. I think, and we spoke about this, I think, last week too, that there are some that approach networking with no personal element. Simply, this is my job. This is the work I have to do. I'm going to do it, get out and move on. And, to each his own. Okay, that's fine. I personally, and I think we could all in some way benefit from enjoying an actual personal relationship with those people that we work with. And I realize that it may not be extremely, extremely intimate relationships, close relationships where you're always having the deepest of conversations. But the idea that we just kind of go in, we work, and we leave, I think we're missing out on a really rich element of life as human beings, which is an opportunity for genuine relationships. If we're going to work with people, particularly in one market on an ongoing basis, why not invest in those on multiple levels, personally and professionally? I think it's really, really great. I want to touch on one more element of this networking conversation, which is networking meetings. I used to, as a wedding photographer, attend them pretty regularly. I would say at least once a month anyway. Is this something that you guys invest your time in, Rich and Heather? Are they happening as regularly now compared to, say, 5 or 10 years ago? What does that scene look like, and how do you handle it?
We went to a networking. We went to Kristen's little networking thing the other day. You and I did, and which is any kind of opportunities like that, I will go. I normally. I don't even bring business cards there. Normally I'm collecting business cards and like using that, be like, okay, I'm going to contact them, but and be proactive again. But it doesn't happen. It's not. The world has changed a lot in 10 years. So those kind of wedding planners and vendors that decide to do these vendor things, vendor luncheons or get-togethers. It's just not the same anymore. I think that so many wedding professionals nowadays, they have full-time jobs and they do wedding stuff on the side. That's not how it was 10 years ago. And we talked about it before.
And social media has probably had a big impact too. It's just happening. The in-person stuff is happening a lot less frequently.
It's the illusion of connection. The social media, it makes you feel like you have a connection with someone, but reality you really don't. And I think that's and so that's why I think in some sense face-to-face networking will never go away. And so in fact, I encourage all the other photographers to just have relationships through social media, because then they won't be doing what I'm doing. And
I know, I feel like we've given away all of our secrets today.
And I was going to tell you what I was laughing about. Okay, so Nathan, about 10 years ago, I'm Corey McNabb. He doesn't do photography anymore, but he valued networking so much that he would buy he would go to a wedding show, buy a booth, even a double booth, and make it so profoundly amazing that people were awed by it. But he hired someone to man that booth, and what he did was he walked around and networked with all the other wedding vendors, because he said, that's the reason I'm here. I'm here for those wedding vendors. And he said, what other opportunity am I going to get this many wedding vendors in one room, and I can just go. I mean, boom, 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 boom. Go.
That's really smart. That's really smart. Do you
so
guys do wedding shows anymore? Is that something that
we've never done a wedding show?
You never have? Okay, I think maybe you did mention that before. I know that when I was shooting at a much lower price point, it was almost a gimme. I mean, I mean extremely low, like in the $1,000 or maybe even less range when I was first starting out. It was almost a gimme. You could go in there and book a bunch. But I wonder if wedding shows do draw a lot of the lower end market in comparison to, especially again, these opportunities for relationships over the long run with a wedding coordinator who can send clients that fit your price point your way and continue to do so even as you continue to change your prices. Of course, that's another advantage of these relationships versus something that's just a one-off like a bridal show.
Yeah, and that's a good tip too, Nathan. I never have any I don't have any pricing on here whatsoever. I don't want to hand out any kind of pricing on here when if I want to double my pricing tomorrow, I can easily do that, because my pricing does not exist on paper. Especially at a wedding vendor, because again, tomorrow I can call a wedding planner and be like, hey, yesterday I was this price point, now I'm at this price point. And you mentioned that several times. That's one of the biggest things about having a relationship, not just with wedding with brides and their friends who are probably normally in the same socioeconomic bracket, but with a wedding planner. Like she may be getting lower in brides and she may be getting higher in brides. She wants to know, who am I going to send this bride to? And so yesterday she may have sent this bride to you, but today she's going to send this bride to you because you're a higher price point now. So I mean, it's easier, it's less stressful to increase your pricing with those type of relationships with vendors. So.
For sure.
I want to hear from Haylee.
I don't know. Haley's been so good.
Wedding photography is not really my specialty, so I was going to let y'all handle all of that.
So are you glad that we've been really?
Cow, it's 2:45.
I know. I was like, gosh. We need to shut it down. Rich and I could just talk and talk.
We are so sorry, Haylee.
No, you're fine. I feel like we could have made this into two different episodes, like one on wedding photography networking and one on whatever it is that I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of what we said is specific to weddings.
It is.
So,
because for me, in-person networking is a huge part of my business. Like going out.
So Haylee, maybe you can kind of give a little perspective and how your business differs from Rich and Heather's, and then kind of get into how you approach the process of networking.
Yeah. So I'm focused mostly on working with other businesses, and all of the people that are running businesses are at networking meetings. They're looking for accountants. They're looking for, people that are going to build their business up, but then also they can send referrals to. So I don't know why this isn't a bigger deal, because I've been to so many networking meetings and they're like, oh, you're the first photographer to come. But it's always, I need family photos, which I'm not really a family photographer. I need real estate. Real estate agents are always looking for photographers at these networking meetings, but I don't do real estate photography either. So I always send them to the people in the area that I know are very great at it. They may be a little more expensive than they're expecting to pay, but it's worth the money. But going to these networking meetings has allowed me to meet small business owners that are potentially looking to grow their social media, or potentially looking for photos for their website that I can help with. And like I mentioned last week in the episode about going and taking pictures of the event, if you're holding that camera in your hand, they know you're a photographer and they're going to come up and talk to you if they need photos. It makes it super easy for you to just kind of put yourself out there without putting yourself out there and having to go run and introduce yourself to everyone because they're coming up to you if they need those photos.
And will you actually reach out? Because this is talking about the idea of adding value. It's a great opportunity if you reach out ahead of time to whoever's heading up that meeting and say, hey, do you need photos? I'll bring my camera with me and just shoot some images at the event.
Yeah. So I went to a chamber meeting a couple weeks ago, and how it worked was I reached out to a local coffee shop and I said, I knew the owner from a previous job that I had. And I said, hey, I'd really love to come and shoot some photos of coffee for you for social media and just kind of build my portfolio in that sense. And she said, oh yeah, we'd love to have you. But we also have this chamber meeting I feel like would be a great opportunity for you. Would you want to come and take some photos of it for me in place of doing that coffee, the coffee shots? And I said, well, I'd actually love to do both. And so I took my camera, I went and I met so many different people there that I otherwise wouldn't have met. And they did come up to me and say, oh, you're a photographer. You have this camera in your hand. Let's see how we can work together, and sometimes it's to benefit their business. Like if they are selling something and they want you to buy it, they'll come and do that. And that's what networking meetings are for. So I think that's really important. But I think you have to, through our earlier conversation, you do have to go to these events. I mean, I know that a lot of photographers they may be busy, they're shooting all the time. The idea of taking their camera with them to an event and offering what really is probably going to amount to free photography, at least initially, you have to go in with the right mentality there, which is I'm going to give without expecting anything in return, and maintaining that and doing so consistently over a span of events, let's say, assuming that you're going to continue to do that, is what is ultimately going to generate the return on investment of time and effort and energy. But it's that proactive attitude of I want to figure out a way to give versus expecting something in return that I think makes a really big difference. I'm curious about a couple of things. So, Haylee, and I think you've talked about it on the series before, but I know that you're more of an introvert or have introverted tendencies and a little bit quieter. The idea of you going to a networking event or multiple events on an ongoing basis doesn't really seem like you. Like, how do you go about the approach, or how do you go about stepping out of that kind of introverted shell and meeting people in a way that doesn't kind of stress you out too badly? Well, I think you've kind of mentioned it before, is focusing on those individual conversations rather than realizing how many people are in the room. Because most wedding photographers that I know are introverts, but they're going and they're coordinating, up to 15 people at a time. Well, more than that, if you're doing all the family portraits, scrambling to get them all to do their role, get in the pictures. You can't be introverted in that sense. Like for me, I can be outgoing if I need to be outgoing. It's more of, am I comfortable in the situation? So you just have to look at it as who you're talking to in that moment, rather than focusing on the fact that there are 25 people in this room that I could possibly talk to right now. And I don't want to, but just focusing in on those.
And that's a great metaphor for life as a whole, I think, too. It is ultimately what we make of the situation, and more specifically, and to your point, what we focus on. That's where our mind tends to go. I just had the opportunity to go to a racetrack with my motorcycle again, and it's something that they emphasize in racing and riding technique over and over again, is the significance of making sure that you're not looking in front of you, but that you're looking beyond where you currently are. Because if you continue to look right here in front of you, if you focus in the wrong place to our conversation, it's going to be easy not only to get distracted, but ultimately to go the wrong direction. And then you risk crashing and hurting yourself and potentially other people. So where we put our attention and focus ultimately can make a big, big difference, even when it comes to something like so-called introversion, which, as you pointed out, is I think pretty commonplace amongst photographers these days. A lot of people would claim that tendency. That's really interesting. And I'm glad that you point out the significance of focus, but ultimately that idea of focusing on individual conversations. I think it's powerful. It's something else I'm curious about too. Do you have a process, a methodology of meeting people and capturing their information effectively so that you don't forget it and then can more easily follow up with them after the fact?
Yeah. So most of the time, like I'm not a big business card person. I have they're bad ones. I don't hand them out. Like I'd rather connect on social media or get an email and send it out right then or get a phone number. Otherwise that card's going to go in my bag and I'm never going to use it again. But at most of these networking meetings, they are carrying business cards. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. I don't ask for a business card unless I know I want to talk to them again. Otherwise, I feel like it sets the expectation that you're going to reach out to them. And when you don't, they never want to work with you again. Just because they were expecting you to reach out. So if I do get a business card, I try following up and just saying, hey, it was great meeting you, usually through email. I'm not one to call someone on the phone, but just send them an email and say, hey, it was great meeting you. Let me know if I can ever help you, or if you, want to send me a list of whatever you do. I'd love to send you referrals. And that's another piece of networking is they're not just looking for themselves, but they're looking for their friends and their family that might need referrals for things like family photos or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Maybe we've talked about this before, but I'm amazed that we're still here in 2018 and business cards are a thing. I'd like of all the amazing technology that we have, how there is not a kind of a standardized process of changing contact information is so weird to me.
But guess what? Guess what? I figured out how to make it more personal.
Oh, do tell.
Oh, so on the back of every one of my business cards is a different question. And so basically, I before I give them a business card, I fan them out and say, hey, every one of my business on the front end it has my contact information, but on the back end it has a different question, just a question. And so literally I say, hey, I want to give you a business card, but I wanted to get to know you. I want you to get to know me. And so whoever business card you pick out, you read the question, and both of us have to answer it. And then all of a sudden, immediately, I've had some great beginning conversations. Like one of them. One of the question was,
I feel like we should grab one.
What was the most beautiful place you've ever been to before? And or you traveled to before, or something like that, and then all of a sudden, boom, opened up about these amazing travel. I'm talking to a businessman, and which I had nothing in common with this guy. All of a sudden, bam, we had an immediate connection. We're like, oh, travel. And he was talking about this amazing cruise he took through Croatia and like between these two mountains. And all of a sudden, I was captivated. I talked to him about my travels, and like all of a sudden, like we had something in common. And guess what? That business card, like obviously immediately started a relationship, which I'm all about. So
Sarah Burgess says, "Oh yeah, Rich Smith does have great business cards." Hey, Sarah.
No, and I think this is a great point to end on. Haylee, before I do you have anything that you wanted to add to the points that you were making?
Not really. I mean, I had other points, but it's okay.
But we talked way too long.
Look for the bonus show notes. Look for the bonus show notes at bokehpodcast.com since Haylee oversees our show notes.
I will say that if you're looking for networking events, there are so many that are, national clubs, and I can add a few that I attend in the show notes, but then go to Eventbrite and just look up, I think it's like business networking or business events. Okay. And you can click, and most of those companies or those organizations are putting all of their information in there, just to make it easy for people to, RSVP that they're coming, but then it's also searchable. So that's one way that I found to attend those meetings.
Oh, that's really great. Okay, so we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes as well. And the point that I just kind of want to end on, really 2 points, I guess, that kind of sums up our conversation. One, Rich, that you highlighted so brilliantly with your business cards, which is the reality, which is that we have so much, or I say so much, I'll put it out there as at least something in common with any and everyone that we meet. And again, is our tendency toward introversion. Many of us photographers The reality is that we can find something that enables us to be able to connect with another person that can start a relationship that not only has the opportunity certainly to benefit our business, but also ultimately to enrich our personal lives as well. And I really think that we need to put more emphasis on that personal aspect going into it. And Rich and Heather, I love that. I love the way that you've exemplified that in your approach. And the last thing, and this is something that Sarah actually highlighted a second ago, a quote from earlier in our conversation, giving without expecting in return. The significance of going into a relationship or a potential relationship with a vendor with the focus on adding value, the focus outward versus inward, we're not only going to benefit personally from that, but of course our business is going to benefit as well. And really at the top of that list should be the other person benefits. And it's just kind of a win-win all the way around versus this kind of something that we talked about earlier, this entitled mentality that it's easy to get a chip on our shoulder. And again, I've been guilty of it as well. Easy to get a chip on our shoulder or let our ego get disturbed in one form or another. If we continue to focus outward and focus on adding value to the relationship, everybody's going to win. And so I think that's a great way to kind of end the conversation today. This has been really wonderful. I appreciate you guys so much for making time to share. Thank you all so much for joining this live session today. For those who chimed in and commented, and don't hesitate to come back and do the same next week. For those of you listening on the Bokeh Podcast, you can watch the live session and see what these cards that Rich and Heather were talking about. If you go to facebook.com/photogsedit, PHOTOGSEDIT. And then for those of you watching live or seeing this video, you can go to Bokeh Podcast, BOKEH podcast.com and listen to the audio version, not only of this series, but of course the other episodes that we put out as well. Thank you guys so much. Hope you have an absolutely wonderful Wednesday.
Yes.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and maybe suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.